This is my presentation of Troubling Angels, Women Living with HIV/AIDS. Now, Troubling Angels follows women's narratives of living and aging with HIV/AIDS using an angelic framework to show how their experiences are shaped by social, historical, and structural forces. The book connects themes of illness, mortality, cultural meaning, gendered vulnerability, stigma, and institutional responses, illustrating how intersecting factors like gender, race, class, and culture influence risk, anonymity, and access to care. Now, drawing on this specific framework from the book and course material, my analysis will examine how choices are shaped by structural inequalities and institutional authority, showing that health, anonymity, and vulnerability are socially determined and influence outcomes for illnesses like HIV. We're going to be first examining the first theme of the book of illness, mortality, and cultural meaning. Using the angelic framework reveals how suffering, anonymity, and life and death decisions are shaped by cultural, institutional, and structural forces. Laurie's reflections on assisted suicide show how institutions regulate anonymity and responses to mortality. Reich's ascending and terrible angels highlight how moral frameworks shape hope and despair. And Benjamin Jones' AIDS Angel channels grief into political critique, exposing institutional failures while inspiring resilience. Together, these narratives show that confronting mortality, enduring suffering, or expressing outrage are never purely individual or biomedical acts, but socially mediated ones. Now, angels make inequalities visible by highlighting disparities in palliative care, psychosocial support, and culturally sensitive interventions, showing how socioeconomic stratification, political neglect, and institutional marginalization amplify vulnerability. Found by Voller, 2010, page 5. This is in line with sick women theory. They demonstrate how systemic oppression and historical trauma render bodies vulnerable, making survival dependent on supportive infrastructures, even as dominant systems perpetuate suffering. In sum, the angelic framework shows that illness, mortality, and suffering are deeply embedded in social, cultural, and institutional contexts, revealing that anonymity, care, and resilience are never purely individual, but shaped by systemic inequalities and historical forces. The next theme is gendered and global vulnerability, power, and reproductive anonymity. Now, angels reveal how vulnerability, anonymity, and reproductive decision-making are shaped by cultural, institutional, and structural forces. They observe women navigating sexual risk and reproductive choices within patriarchal norms, moral regulation, and cultural expectations, often struggling to control condom use, monogamy, or knowledge of a partner's sexual history, while men frequently use deception, highlighting how gendered power constrains agency and mediates risk. This was found by Lather, 2018, page 173. Now, angels also trace the global dimensions of HIV/AIDS, noting that by 2000, women accounted for over half of new infections worldwide, from Thailand sex workers to communities across Africa, South and Southeast Asia. This was found by Lather, 2018, page 144. Now, these individual vulnerabilities are compounded by caregiving responsibilities, kinship networks, economic pressures, and structural inequalities, linking micro-level experiences to systemic social determinants. This quote was found by Short and Mulborn, 2015, page 5. Now, historical abuses, such as the Tuskegee syphilis experiment, foster distrust in healthcare and complicate HIV prevention in African American communities, quote found by Jones, 1981, Lather, 2018, page 37. Broader inequities in healthcare, socioeconomic status, and political neglect exemplify Link and Phelan's 1995 concept of fundamental causes, where social conditions drive shifting risk factors, page 10. Therefore, by exposing inequities and challenging moralized notions of sexual and reproductive risk, angels affirm dignity and agency, demonstrating that anonymity, health, and justice are constructed across personal, institutional, and global contexts, found by Short and Mulborn, 2015, page 5. The next theme is stigma, moral judgment, and media representation. Now, angels reveal how stigma and media-driven moral judgment shape women's HIV experiences, linking personal choice to broader societal narratives. They witness women labeled as vectors or innocent victims, showing how moralized coverage frames certain groups as deserving or undeserving of infection, found by Lather, 2018, page 144, and constrains the agency of individuals. Acting as mediators, angels connect these public narratives to lived realities, illustrating how stigma functions as both a moral and structural mechanism of social control. Labeling, stereotyping, and discrimination within power hierarchies create systemic disadvantages for sexual and gender minorities, limiting access to employment, housing, and healthcare, while also driving health disparities through restricted resources and minority stress. This quote was found by Hassan Burler, Phelan and Link, Eside, Williams, and Mann, 2017, page 3, Meyer, 2017. Furthermore, in their witness worlds, angels highlight personal testimonies such as Diane's observation that women with HIV are stereotyped as promiscuous, abnormal, or uneducated, showing how moralized labels misrepresent individuals and limit autonomy, found by Lather, 2018, page 4. They also critique the medical model, demonstrating that labeling a condition as ill involves moral judgment, marking some bodies as socially deviant or morally undesirable, found by Witts, 2019, page 100. In doing so, angels link micro-level experiences of stigma to broader institutional, cultural, and moral structures, showing how societal power dictates who is marginalized or controlled. And the last theme we're going to be discussing is social policy and structural responses. Now, angels act as critical observers and mediators, showing how social policies and structural systems shape women's experience of HIV/AIDS, revealing that vulnerability is not individual failure, but the product of layered inequalities, including poverty, gender hierarchies, and exposure to violence, found by Lather 2018, page 2209. They highlight how harm reduction programs like needle exchanges through Health Focus are constrained by uneven implementation, unsafe housing, underemployment, inadequate healthcare, and political decisions, such as the U.S. delay in federal support and Russia's reliance on mass imprisonment, demonstrating how governments, law, and institutional power shape HIV risk, found by Holtzgrave and Coran, 2006, Gutzner, 2008, Witz, 2019, page 23. Now, prevention and treatment programs, while more cost-effective than punitive approaches, are often undermined by government priorities, favoring criminal justice responses instead. Furthermore, angels also reveal how bureaucratic systems affect daily life, as low-income women navigate SSI/SSDI-based rigid punitive procedures that reinforce poverty, stress, and stigma, while access to HIV treatment is limited as life insurance is revoked, medication withheld from those deemed irresponsible, and prolonged survival complicates disability, job training, and state-run programs. This quote was found by Witz, 2019, page 34, Katz, 2013, Schramm, 2015, Wakwant, 2009, Whittle et al., 2017. Therefore, angels link personal experiences to broader structures, showing HIV/AIDS as socially produced and highlighting the need for interventions that address inequality, redistribute resources, and empower marginalized communities, found by Lather 2018, page 27 and 209. Now, we're going to be looking at a sociological analysis of all this information and what it kind of means. First, examining the social structures, inequalities, and institutions involved within the illness of AIDS. Now, a sociological analysis of women's experiences with HIV/AIDS highlights that women's experiences of AIDS are shaped by intersecting gendered, economic, and institutional forces, patriarchal norms, poverty, caregiving responsibilities, and limited healthcare access constrain autonomy and sexual and reproductive decision-making, while historical and racialized inequalities, such as legacy of Tuskegee, foster distrust and perpetuate vulnerability. Policies, institutions, and media narratives further influence access, moralize illness, and reinforce stigma, demonstrating that these experiences are deeply structured by social and systemic inequalities rather than purely biological or individual factors. Next, we're going to be looking at how AIDS is reflected as a construction of health and disability. Now, health and disability are socially constructed, shaped by moral and cultural frameworks that define vulnerability and normalcy. These frameworks influence access to treatment, the assignment of stigma, and public perceptions of legitimacy and blame. For women living with HIV/AIDS, disparities in healthcare, social support, and reproductive resources reflect how structural inequalities rooted in gender, race, class, and institutional power produce different outcomes. Thereby, mortality, reproductive risk, and resilience are shaped by social hierarchies, institution, and cultural norms, revealing HIV as both a systemic and biomedical issue. Next, we're going to be examining the theoretical and conceptual frameworks from class, as class frameworks help explain how HIV/AIDS is shaped by intersecting systems of power, as intersectionality shows how gender, race, class, and global location compound vulnerability. Sick women theory highlights bodily susceptibility under systemic oppression, and fundamental causes theory demonstrate that social conditions, not individual behaviors, drive shifting health risk. These structural forces are reinforced through cultural norms and social judgment. Labeling and moral regulation restrict care and autonomy. Structural violence exposes how political and economic systems sustain disparities. The social construction of illness frames disease as culturally defined. The sick role dictates who is recognized as legitimately ill, and stigma theory shows how discrimination amplifies social and health disadvantages. Therefore, building on these frameworks and employing the angelic perspective from troubling angels through a global health lens, women's experience of HIV/AIDS can be understood as socially constructed, produced by intersecting structural, historical, and cultural forces. Gendered power relations, economic inequalities, institutional policies, and stigma shape vulnerability, constrain autonomy, and mediate access to care, demonstrating that effective interventions must address both individual agency and broader social determinants of health. These are my references used, and I hope you guys were able to learn a little bit more about this illness altogether using the angelic framework.